Since the dawn of the Cold War, the CIA has been watching the skies, quietly collecting reports of unexplained aerial phenomena. What they saw was never meant for the public. Files mysteriously vanish. Project Blue Book Annex remains sealed decades after the official programs ended. Pilots reported glowing spheres, impossible maneuvers, objects faster than anything known, and yet, each time the records disappear. Frame 144A. A satellite photo showing a metallic disc moving at impossible speed. Taken in 1985, classified above top secret, and then gone reassigned. Buried in a vault only a few insiders can access. What did it show? And why can't we see it? The CIA isn't denying UFOs exist. They're denying we get to know. Every report, every photograph, every encounter is controlled, monitored, silenced. The files may vanish, but the questions remain. What did they really see? And why are they keeping it from us? March 2011. A pale sun hangs over Washington, D.C., its light glinting off the concrete facade of the National Archives 2 facility in College Park, Maryland. Inside, the temperature never strays beyond a narrow range, cool, dry, precise. For decades, this building has been a sanctuary of official memory. Military reports, declassified memos, the quiet machinery of bureaucracy. But on this particular morning, a records technician named Daniel Webb noticed something that shouldn't have been there. A gray archival box, unmarked, without a reference code. It had appeared overnight on a rolling cart, bound for the CIA's transfer review section. Inside, according to Webb, were folders that bore a single phrase stamped in red ink: U2 Project Aquatone, Foreign Observations. At first glance, the documents looked ordinary: test flight data from the 1950s, reconnaissance summaries, meteorological notes. But then came the pages that didn't fit: handwritten transcripts, pilot logs with entries describing unidentified aerial phenomena at altitudes exceeding 60,000 feet, radar plots from Groom Lake with luminous signatures that made no sense against known flight parameters. The technician quietly alerted his supervisor. Within hours, the gray box was gone, removed by two men carrying CIA identification badges. No explanation, no receipt, no record of retrieval. That afternoon, Webb filed an internal incident report. Weeks later, when he tried to retrieve a copy, the system returned a single line: document not found. It might have ended there, one more anomaly buried beneath the mountain of Cold War secrecy, if not for a curious footnote uncovered years later by independent researcher Jeffrey T. Richelson of the National Security Archive. In 2013, Richelson obtained a partial inventory list of the CIA's historical archives. Among the entries was a sealed compartment labeled Material 1952-1974, Project Blue Book Annex, Restricted Access, Special Handling Required. Blue Book was supposed to have been closed in 1969. The U.S. Air Force had declared the matter settled. No evidence that UFOs represented extraterrestrial craft, no threat to national security. Yet here it was, an annex still classified under CIA custody, decades after its official termination. Why former intelligence officer Robert Hastings, who spent years interviewing retired personnel from radar and missile sites, later said, "The Air Force ended Blue Book for the public. The CIA never stopped watching." Archival traces suggest that the so-called annex was born out of a dispute between agencies. In 1952, during the Great Washington National Sightings, when glowing discs were tracked over the Capitol on consecutive weekends, the CIA's Office of Scientific Intelligence grew alarmed. It wasn't just about aliens, it was about confusion. If unidentified objects could penetrate restricted airspace, the Soviets could exploit the panic. That concern evolved into Project Stork, later folded into the broader framework of Aquatone, the U-2 spy plane program. The logic was simple: use advanced reconnaissance to identify every anomaly in the sky. Yet buried among the mission logs, researchers found not Soviet MiGs, but references to objects of unknown origin performing non-ballistic maneuvers. The existence of these files was never acknowledged publicly, but pilots knew. Declassified. Interviews with U-2 operators from the 1950s mention the same refrain: bright spheres at extreme altitudes reflecting sunlight, moving against the wind. Many were likely weather balloons or reflections from high-altitude aircraft, but not all. One memo dated August 13, 1957, described an intercept attempt over the Baltic. The U-2's radar locked onto a target traveling at an estimated 7,000 miles per hour, far beyond the capabilities of any known craft. The contact disappeared moments later. When researchers sought that memo decades later, they found it redacted entirely, except for 3 words left visible: verify light source. For years, the vault that shouldn't exist became an internal whisper among archivists. Files that appeared vanished, reappeared in modified form. Reference codes reassigned, project numbers changed, witnesses silenced under non-disclosure renewal orders. It wasn't a single cover-up, but a slow erosion of evidence, one paper, one reel of film at a time. In 2018, a Freedom of Information request filed by the Black Vault website led to the release of over 2,700 pages of CIA UFO-related records. Most were innocuous: weather analyses, foreign propaganda studies, psychological assessments. But hidden among them were references to material still withheld, entries marked referral to another agency. Another agency. Each time the trail pointed back to the same location, a restricted vault in the lower level of the CIA Records Integration Division. Its existence isn't denied, but what it contains remains classified, exempt from public disclosure under national security provisions. What was inside that unmarked grey box? Why did references to Project Blue Book continue after its official end? And what did those pilots really see, suspended between the clouds and the stars, in the thin air where no balloon should drift and no bird could fly? Perhaps the answer is mundane: experimental aircraft, radar ghosts, human error. Or perhaps, like so many times before, the truth was hidden not to protect the public from aliens, but from itself. From the consequences of believing that something beyond our understanding has already been here, watching. And maybe, just maybe, that grey box in 2011 was never misplaced at all. Maybe it was a test to see who would notice. July 19, 1952. The air over Washington, D.C. was thick and electric, a humid summer night over the capital of the free world. At Washington National Airport, radar operators Edward Nugent and Harry Barnes sat in the dim glow of their screens. The sweep of the scope was hypnotic, steady as a heartbeat. But just after 11:40 p.m., something broke that rhythm. 7 sharp returns, bright, solid, moving fast. "Harry," Nugent said, leaning closer, I don't know what I've got." Barnes rolled his chair beside him. He had seen false echoes before, weather ghosts, temperature inversions, but these weren't that. The objects were solid, tracked consistently across multiple radar sweeps, moving in unpredictable directions. Then came the detail that changed everything. 2 of them were over the White House. Barnes reached for the phone. "Andrews, this is National. You got anything?" Andrews Air Force Base radar confirmed. Targets visible, same course, same speed. They scrambled interceptors. That night, pilots from the 113th Fighter Wing tore into the black sky. But as they approached the blips, the lights vanished. Silence. Then minutes later, the returns reappeared, this time behind them. "They're toying with us," one pilot radioed, half disbelieving. "They're circling the city." At 3 a.m., radar picked them up again, 10 objects now, streaking across the Potomac, hovering briefly above the Capitol, then shooting off toward Baltimore, at what Barnes estimated was over 7,000 miles per hour. The radar men knew those speeds were beyond any known aircraft in 1952, yet the instruments didn't lie. By dawn, the phones were ringing across Washington. The Air Force's Project Blue Book dispatched investigators immediately. The press had already gotten wind of it. The Washington Post headline the next morning was impossible to ignore. "Saucer outran jet, pilot reveals." For the next week, the story refused to die. On July 26th, it happened again. A second wave. This time the Air Force sent their best. Major William Patterson leading a flight of F-94 interceptors. Patterson's voice on the radio still exists, preserved in Air Force transcripts. I see them now, 4 white lights. I'm going to close in and take a look. Seconds later, they've surrounded my plane. Control tower asked what he meant. Patterson didn't respond for several seconds. Then, they're gone. All 4 just disappeared. Radar confirmed his account. 4 blips had converged on his position. Then, nothing. Inside the Pentagon, panic turned to containment. President Truman was briefed the following morning. He instructed General Samford, Air Force Director of Intelligence, to get control of the narrative. The press conference that followed, held on July 29th, remains one of the largest in U.S. Air Force history. General Samford, flanked by uniformed officers, spoke carefully before the cameras. The Air Force has determined that the recent sightings over Washington were caused by a temperature inversion, producing radar anomalies. Temperature inversion, an atmospheric condition where layers of warm air can bend radar waves and create false targets. It sounded plausible, scientific, safe. The reporters nodded, some skeptically. But the radar men who'd watched the returns knew it wasn't true. Edward Nugent, in a private interview years later, said, "They told us to forget what we saw. But those weren't inversions. We had weather radar running that night. It didn't show a thing." Even the Civil Aeronautics Administration rejected the explanation. Their meteorological reports showed no inversion strong enough to produce such consistent returns. Behind closed doors, the CIA grew concerned, not about aliens, but about fear. A special intelligence report dated August 19, 1952, classified top secret eyes only, outlined the agency's stance. Reports of unexplained aerial phenomena have created a mass hysteria risk that may be exploited by hostile powers. Recommend formation of a panel to evaluate the psychological implications of the UFO problem. That panel would become the Robertson Panel. Convened in early 1953, chaired by physicist Howard P. Robertson. Their task wasn't to find truth, it was to shape perception. Their conclusion: UFOs pose no direct threat, but public interest in them did. The panel advised a program of debunking to reduce citizen attention and press coverage. From that moment, the story of the Washington sightings was rewritten. Files were reclassified. Radar logs vanished. Witness statements were edited to remove words like disk, craft, and maneuver. The temperature inversion explanation became official doctrine, but in 2002, 50 years later, the National Archives quietly released fragments of the original communications. Among them was a radar plot from National Airport, with annotations in pencil, circles around the White House, labeled simply, "Objects observed visually." The handwriting was Harry Barnes's. Next to it, one more line, written faintly in the margin. They knew exactly where not to go, Pentagon airspace untouched. That detail, historians later noted, mirrored a classified memo describing a similar event over Soviet Moscow in 1952. Unidentified targets tracked, circling government centers, disappearing without engagement. 2 superpowers, same phenomenon. Both denied, both buried. By the time the Washington incident faded from newspapers, the Air Force had quietly tripled its funding for radar modernization and rapid scramble alert systems. Outwardly, officials dismissed the sightings as weather. Internally, they prepared as if they had just survived a test, and perhaps they had. If those lights over the Capitol weren't of this world, they didn't come to attack. They came to observe. To prove that even the most protected airspace on Earth could be breached, silently at will. The cover-up worked, but not perfectly, because decades later, the record still speaks. In fragments, in erased lines, in the faint hum of radar echoes that never truly disappeared from the archives of the sky. Langley, Virginia, February 9, 1953. The winter air bit through the hangar-like corridors of the newly minted CIA headquarters. Inside a nondescript records room, a courier from the Psychological Strategy Board carried a thin brown envelope marked "Eyes Only, UFO Intelligence Correlation." It was one of hundreds of interagency memos that flowed through Washington that month, but this one was different. Its destination line read simply, "Deputy Director, Intelligence. Immediate review required. And it never reached him. We know the memo existed because it was logged in the CIA's internal index. Reference PSB 2353. The entry described it in clinical terms. Summary of coordinated intelligence findings on unconventional aerial phenomena. Source collation and implications for national security. After that entry, the file trail ends. For decades, researchers searched for PSB 2353. It wasn't listed among the declassified documents released in the 1978 Freedom of Information sweep. It wasn't microfilmed. It wasn't destroyed according to any shredder logs. It was as if it had been quietly removed, lifted from history itself. Former CIA archivist Henry Milford once described the loss in an off-record conversation later published in The Black Vault Files. It didn't go missing. It was never meant to be found. To understand what the missing memo likely contained, you have to look at what was happening around it. Just weeks earlier, the Robertson Panel, convened by the CIA's Scientific Advisory Board, had issued its controversial findings. UFOs were a public relations threat, not a physical one. The agency's next move was to control the story. Internal memos discussed managing the narrative of aerial phenomena through psychological operations. Particularly in mass media, PSB 2353 was believed to be the directive that formalized this, the moment UFO secrecy moved from military compartmentalization to information warfare. It wasn't about what the government knew. It was about what it wanted the world not to believe. A handful of secondary documents hinted at its contents. One titled Evaluation of Public Response to Unexplained Aerial Incidents referenced a joint report authored under PSB authority, February 1953. Another contained a chilling line buried deep within. Subject exhibits non-terrestrial maneuver characteristics. Assessment withheld pending PSB review. Who wrote that sentence is unknown. What subject referred to, no one can confirm. In 1977, when journalist George Knapp filed his first FOIA request for PSB 2353, the CIA's response was brief. No such memo is known to exist within current agency holdings. But the next year, when researcher Stanton Friedman submitted the same request, he received a different reply. Records formerly indexed under PSB 2353 have been transferred to another agency. Which agency was never specified. For Friedman, that single line confirmed what many already suspected. The document hadn't been destroyed. It had been reclassified outside the CIA, likely under a joint intelligence structure. Possibly the NSA, possibly something deeper. And then there was the witness. In 1981, former Air Force intelligence officer Major Donald Kehoe, long retired, his health failing, gave one of his last interviews. When asked about the missing memo, his answer was quiet but certain. I saw it, just once. A summary from the CIA to the Air Technical Intelligence Center. It mentioned structured craft, metallic intelligent motion. They weren't ours. The PSB wanted it suppressed. His testimony was later dismissed as anecdotal. Yet declassified memos from the same month as PSB 2353 carry uncanny parallels. They describe intensified foreign press interest in unidentified aerial devices and propose countermeasures through psychological framing. The language matched Kehoe's account almost, word for word. By 1955, the CIA had created the Office of Scientific Intelligence, OSI, and UFO-related analysis shifted under its control. Files that once circulated between the Air Force and CIA were now sealed under a single classification. Unauthorized disclosure subject to prosecution. It was then that the term UFO began to vanish from official correspondence, replaced with phrases like unidentified aerial activity, foreign vehicle research, or aerospace incident of interest. The subject hadn't gone away. It had been linguistically buried. Researchers later discovered that the CIA's internal file registry skipped entire numeric sequences in its UFO section between 1952 and 1954. The gaps matched precisely where PSB 2353 should have been catalogued. One historian of intelligence, Dr. Catherine Olmsted, wrote in 2005, The absence of the memo is itself a data point. Its deliberate removal represents policy, not loss. Today, only a handful of fragments survive. A single carbon copy cover sheet stamped, "Destroyed 1969" surfaced, briefly in a CIA reading room before being reclassified again in 2012. Researchers managed to photograph it before its disappearance. In faded typewriter ink, one note remains legible. Circulate only among approved defense analysis units. Avoid public release. Potential non-human intelligence implications inconclusive. That was 1953. 70 years later. It remains one of the only written instances of the CIA using the phrase non-human intelligence. What was in the missing pages? No one can say for certain, but its vanishing marks a turning point. The moment the UFO mystery stopped being a question of observation and became a matter of control. Some secrets are hidden behind black ink, others behind silence, and sometimes the most revealing thing in a government archive is the space where a memo should have been. Tehran, Iran, September 19, 1976. The city slept beneath a restless sky. Just past midnight, the air tower at Mehrabad International Airport received its first report. Objects in the north sky, stationary, intense light. Within minutes, calls flooded in. Military officers, pilots, civilians, all describing the same thing. A brilliant sphere hovering above the capital, pulsing with red, green, and blue lights that shifted faster than any known aircraft. Iran's Imperial Air Force scrambled a Phantom F-4 interceptor from Sharoki Air Base. The pilot, Captain Mohammad Reza Azizi, climbed through 20,000 feet before the object lit up, not in response to radar lock, but as if reacting to him. Then his radar went dead. Communications failed. All instruments, compass, altimeter, weapons system, blanked out. Seconds later, as he turned back toward base, they all came back online. Another pilot took off moments later, Lieutenant Parviz Jafari. His jet-locked radar on the target instantly. Size comparable to a Boeing 707, he reported. As he closed in, a smaller luminous object detached from the main one, accelerating straight toward his aircraft. Jafari prepared to fire an AIM-9 missile. At that exact moment, his weapons panel froze. He couldn't fire. The approaching sphere stopped. Mid-air, then reversed direction. At a velocity no known craft could achieve, and rejoined the main body above Tehran. Two objects began to move together, north, then straight up, disappearing into the upper atmosphere. What followed wasn't a rumor. It was a military crisis. Radar stations at multiple bases confirmed the contacts. Civil aviation towers corroborated the same movement on visual and radar channels. Even a passenger airliner crew witnessed the phenomena from above the Caspian Sea. By dawn, Iranian Air Force Command ordered a full intelligence report. It was transmitted to the U.S. Defense Attaché Office in Tehran under the title, "Unidentified Flying Objects over Iran." The memo reached Washington within 48 hours and was immediately classified top secret. The declassified version, released decades later under defy, is one of the most chilling UFO documents in CIA history. It includes this summary line, typed in cool bureaucratic language. The object exhibited extraordinary flight characteristics not consistent with any known aircraft or missile. Attached were radar charts, pilot testimonies and sensor readouts, each showing the same impossible maneuvers. Right-angle turns at Mach speeds, rapid altitude jumps from 7,000 to 40,000 feet, and electromagnetic interference consistent with directed radiation effects. For a few hours, the Iranian military was certain it had encountered something beyond Earth's technology, but then the cover-up began. Within days, a U.S. Air Force technical team arrived in Tehran under the pretext of communications evaluation. Their mission, quietly retrieve data tapes, radar logs, and cockpit recordings. They worked directly with the Defense Attaché's office, under CIA supervision. The Iranian officers later reported that all original radar film and signal recordings were taken for duplication and not returned. The copies they received days later had several gaps, precisely during the moments when contact was strongest. Even more peculiar, the CIA's internal cables about the Tehran incident stopped abruptly. One memo from the US Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, dated October 1976, states, "Further analysis of the phenomenon has been transferred to agency technical divisions. Agency was not specified, but those familiar with the time period knew what it meant." The CIA had absorbed the case. Years later, when researcher Bruce Maccabee accessed the declassified documents, he noted something odd. The CIA's version had one page missing, the section labeled Intelligence Assessment, Classified Annex. That annex has never been released. It's widely believed it contained infrared and radar signatures analyzed by US intelligence, data that could not be explained by Soviet technology or natural phenomena. Colonel Jafari himself, who later became a general, publicly spoke about the event in the early 2000s. His statement remains one of the most credible first-hand testimonies ever recorded. "They told us not to discuss what we saw, but I will say this, it was not from here. We chased it. It controlled us. Every time I moved, it knew." When asked if he believed the CIA had evidence of extraterrestrial involvement, Jafari paused and replied, "They took everything." Why would they do that if it was just a malfunction? Decades later, in 2013, a batch of internal CIA documents from the 1970s, released under their UFO Reading Room archive, contained a single redacted note referencing the Tehran event. The document's heading read, "IA Analysis, Non-Conventional Aerospace Technology Event, Middle East." The body was fully blacked out except one line. Subject exhibited structured formation and intelligence response to interception attempt. That one phrase, intelligence response, remains one of the most cryptic in UFO history. To this day, the Tehran case stands apart for one reason. It wasn't a story. It was a military engagement, fully documented, radar confirmed and logged by multiple independent sources. Every fact points to something real and something intelligently controlled. The CIA's quiet removal of the raw data, the missing annex, and the coordinated silence that followed. These were not acts of curiosity. They were acts of containment. What the Iranian pilots saw that night over Tehran wasn't just a light in the sky. It was a moment when two civilizations might have briefly met. And the agency's reaction showed just how far it was willing to go to ensure that the world would never fully know. In 1985, inside the CIA's Photographic Intelligence Division at Langley, Virginia, something unusual happened. An unmarked envelope arrived through diplomatic channels from a US airbase in Alaska. It was labeled only, "Eyes only, priority, immediate analysis." Inside was a single 8810 photograph. No report, no context, just the image. It showed what appeared to be a metallic disc hovering above a bank of clouds at roughly 35,000 feet. The photo had been captured by an automated reconnaissance camera aboard a KH-11 spy satellite, one of America's most advanced orbital eyes at the time. At first glance, the analysts thought it might be a reflection, a sensor anomaly, or even a balloon. But when the raw data file was processed, the reality hit them hard. The object cast a shadow, a perfect, measurable shadow across the cloud tops, meaning it was a solid structured craft, nearly 60 feet in diameter. And it wasn't stationary. Its trajectory showed controlled motion, ascending at a speed of nearly 3,000 pi, before disappearing from frame within 0.8 seconds. That's when the phone call started. The photo, later internally referred to as Frame 144A, was immediately classified as above top secret. Only 5 people were granted clearance to review it, including the division head and one deputy from the Directorate of Science and Technology. Within hours, a quiet chain of command was triggered, from CIA headquarters to the National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, and then to the Pentagon's Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA. By dawn the next day, Frame 144A had been moved into a secure vault under Langley's Special Access Programs, SAP, on an area so classified that even Its budget line was hidden from Congress. The reason wasn't just what the photo showed, but what it implied. The KH-11's resolution could identify objects as small as 6 inches across. In the magnified print, engineers identified symmetrical paneling, heat distortion near the lower hull, and geometric plating. Inconsistent with any known human aircraft of the 1980s, the metallic skin reflected sunlight in a way no conventional alloy did, described in the report as having anomalous polarization behavior. In simpler terms, the light coming off it bent wrong, as if the material was absorbing and re-emitting energy. A week later, the CIA's Materials Science Lab at Fort Belvoir attempted to match the spectral reflection signature with known aircraft coatings. Nothing matched. The report concluded with a single line, material type unknown. Reflection characteristics suggest exotic composition or non-terrestrial fabrication. That phrase, being non-terrestrial fabrication, caused panic. Within 48 hours, the report was pulled from the Langley archives. Analysts were told it was reclassified under alternate project identification. In reality, it vanished into a black program no one could officially name. For decades, insiders whispered about it. But the first real hint came from a 1997 declassified memo written by CIA image analyst Linda McMillan, who had worked at Langley during that period. In her memoir draft, she wrote, "We saw something that should not have been there. We were told never to discuss it again." The last thing I remember was the phrase external origin, atmospheric entry unknown. Then they took the film. Her draft was leaked years later by an anonymous archivist. It was swiftly denounced as fabricated, though every name, date, and internal stamp she mentioned turned out to be real. The real question wasn't just what was in the photo, but why it was never released. In 2009, British UFO researcher Nick Pope received partial confirmation from a US intelligence contact who described frame 144A as our own Roswell on film. He claimed the image had been reviewed by at least one member of the President's Scientific Advisory Committee in late 1985 and was subsequently locked inside a restricted archive known informally as the Vault, located beneath Langley's imaging center. Then, in 2013, the CIA quietly released a trove of satellite images from the 1980s under its declassification program. But one photo sequence was missing. Sequence numbers 143A to 145B, ducks, gone. Publicly, the agency blamed film degradation, but technicians who worked on the project knew that digital archives existed and they were intact. So where did frame 144A go? Rumors persist that the image was shown during a closed-door session at the Pentagon in 1991, attended by senior intelligence officials and members of the Senate Armed Services Committee. A former defense staffer later stated anonymously, "It wasn't just the image, it was the data attached to it, radiation readings, magnetic field anomalies, and the fact that the object left a faint ion trail. That means it was generating an electromagnetic field of its own. If true, that would make the 1985 satellite capture not just a photograph, but scientific evidence. The kind the CIA could never let reach the public. The agency's official stance remains simple. No such image exists, but the 1997 DIA document titled Review of Anomalous Aerospace Phenomena, Classified Imagery, contains one redacted line that might confirm it. Image sample 144A under permanent restricted control. Origin KH-11 platform 1985, that's all. One line, but it's enough. It tells us the photo existed. It tells us the CIA had it. And it tells us, more than anything else, that Langley wasn't just collecting UFO reports. They were collecting borrowed proof and proof they couldn't explain. Proof they couldn't destroy. So they buried it, deep, under lock, under clearance, under silence. In the summer of 1991, inside the silent expanse of Groom Lake, Nevada, a convoy of unmarked trucks rolled past the security checkpoint under moonlight. No insignias, no paperwork, no questions. The guards simply nodded as the lead vehicle displayed a coded authorization plate, Aquarius 71. For years, rumors had whispered through the corridors of military intelligence about a program buried so deep, not even the Joint Chiefs had full clearance. Its name, Project Aquarius. Officially, it didn't exist. Unofficially, it was the central archive for recovered non-terrestrial technology. Operated jointly by the CIA and the Department of Energy, the very existence of the project was first hinted at in a 1980s document leak known as the MJ-12 Papers. Files that spoke of crash retrievals, interagency secrecy, and biological entities of unknown origin. Most dismissed them as fantasy until a former CIA analyst named Thomas Castillo disappeared in 1993 after claiming he'd seen the hangar himself. According to fragments recovered from declassified DIA transcripts, the heart of Project Aquarius lay beneath Hangar 18, a facility near the dry lake bed perimeter. Construction blueprints obtained through FOIA requests confirmed that in Basanisa, a massive underground structure was excavated under special access construction protocols, meaning no official record of purpose or cost existed. Those who worked there described a silence. Unlike any other military base, no radio chatter, no exterior markings. Even the janitorial staff had their memories routinely wiped, a security measure known as compartmental cognitive restriction. But one man broke the silence. Number 90. Air Force engineer Richard Doty, a name that would become infamous in UFO disclosure circles, claimed that the US government had stored several recovered craft in Groom Lake's sub-level vaults. He spoke of one hangar in particular, the so-called Cool Blue Room, where a partially intact disc-shaped object, 52 feet in diameter, was housed under cryogenic containment. Doty's testimony aligned disturbingly well with internal memos uncovered decades later. One, dated August 14, 1991, from the CIA Directorate of Science and Technology, referenced continuing analysis of recovered aerial vehicle. Aquarius Subject 2. Another document described fusion traces in hull material incompatible with terrestrial isotope ratios. Translation: it wasn't from here. According to Doty's notes, the craft had been retrieved from a desert crash site in Socorro County, New Mexico, the same region linked to the Martio 947 Roswell debris and the Martio 1964 Lonnie Zamora sighting. Unlike Roswell's fragmented remains, this object was largely intact. Engineers attempting to reverse engineer its propulsion system found no moving parts, no fuel lines, and no detectable power source. Yet when exposed to high-frequency electromagnetic fields, the hull emitted a faint blue luminescence and vibrated at a frequency measured in terahertz. Doty wrote, "It hummed. You could feel it through your bones." Whatever it wasn't dead metal. It was alive. Whether poetic or literal, the CIA took him seriously enough to classify all subsequent analysis under IRQ-level access, the same category reserved for nuclear weapons design. In 1994, a redacted Air Force logistics report referred to a facility upgrade called Aquarius Containment Expansion. Its purpose: to construct additional vault space for recovered vehicles. Satellite imagery later confirmed unusual nighttime construction in the restricted area, showing heavy excavation and movement consistent with subterranean infrastructure. The project was never acknowledged publicly. The first real crack came in 2006, when a FOIA release revealed the existence of an internal study titled Non-Conventional Aerial Propulsion, an Analytical Overview. The study cited data provided by Project Aquarius assets 1991-1994. In other words, the research didn't just exist, it was ongoing. A retired intelligence officer later summarized what most insiders already suspected. Aquarius wasn't a study, it was a vault. A vault for things we weren't ready to understand. And within that vault lay something else, not just machinery, but into records endured transcripts, photographs, materials from incidents stretching back to 1947. Among them, Frame 144A, the missing KH-11 satellite photo from Keynote. 5. It hadn't been destroyed. It had been filed under Aquarius. In 2013, the CIA released a heavily redacted report mentioning Project Aquarius only once, under a section labeled Joint Technology Research, Unexplained Aerial Phenomena. Every page after that? Redacted, entire paragraphs blacked out, entire appendices erased. Whatever was under that hangar, whatever was sealed in those cryogenic vaults, it wasn't human, and it wasn't meant to be found. To this day, the CIA officially denies the existence of Project Aquarius, but buried within the National Archives lies a single declassification note from 1995, stamped and signed by the Defense Intelligence Agency. Transfer of Aquarius physical samples to DOE custody confirmed. Physical samples. Of what? No one outside that inner circle has ever known. But one phrase, scrawled in the margin by a reviewing officer, survives, faint, almost illegible, but chillingly clear. This changes everything we thought we knew. If the Phoenix Lights were the sky's unanswered question, then Project Aquarius Muedisausen was the government's hidden answer, then buried, locked away and sealed beneath the desert floor, because sometimes the truth isn't just out there, it's under there.